Have you ever really thought about the connection between what's on your dinner plate and the health of our planet? Well, it turns out they're deeply, deeply connected. And today, we're going to dive into a concept that could completely reshape that relationship for the better. So, here's our game plan. We'll kick things off by digging into farming's big climate challenge. Then we'll ask, what exactly is climate-smart agriculture? We're going to see what it looks like in the real world, how it's going global, and then we'll tackle the tough question. Is this a real solution, or is it just some very clever marketing? All right, so first things first, let's talk about the problem. You see, agriculture is kind of caught in this really dangerous feedback loop. It's getting hit hard by climate change, but it's also a major, major cause of it. And this brings us to a massive question for literally all of us. I mean, with the world's population just continuing to climb, how in the world are we supposed to feed everyone without, cooking the planet in the process? The stakes really could not be higher. Think of it like a vicious cycle. On one hand, climate change is slamming farmers with things like wild weather patterns, brutal droughts, and intense heat that stresses out crops and animals. But on the other hand, farming itself is a huge part of the problem, pumping out tons of greenhouse gases from things like, cow burps and the fertilizers we use. And the scale of this impact is, wow, it's massive. Get this, a full 25% of the entire planet's greenhouse gas emissions come from our food and agriculture systems. That's a huge piece of the pie, and it really underscores just how urgent this is. Okay, so that's the problem. And that, of course, brings us to the proposed solution. It's a concept that's gaining a ton of traction all over the world, climate-smart agriculture, or CSA for short. So what is it exactly? Well, according to big players like the World Bank and the Food and Agriculture Organization, it's basically an approach that tries to do three huge things all at the same time. Make sure we have enough food, help farms deal with the wild weather, and cut back on emissions. Okay, let's break this down because these three pillars are everything for CSA. First, you've got to boost productivity and income so farmers can actually make a good living. Second, you have to build resilience, right? Make farms tough enough to handle floods and droughts. And third, you have to actively reduce emissions. And here's the kicker. You can't just pick one. A real CSA strategy has to hit all three. That all sounds great on paper, right? But what does it actually look like when the rubber meets the road, or I guess when the tractor meets the soil? Let's see how this stuff works out in the field. A really powerful way to think about this is the idea of carbon farming. The goal is to basically transform a farm from a carbon source into a giant carbon sponge, soaking up carbon from the atmosphere and locking it away in the soil. And there are some really practical ways farmers are doing this, things like tilling the soil less often or managing how their livestock graze. Using stuff like compost and mulch not only adds carbon back into the soil, but also helps it hold on to water, which is a huge deal during a drought. The end goal is simple. Pull more carbon into the ground than your farm releases into the air. But here's something that's super important to remember. This isn't just about fancy tech or new farming tricks. The success of all of this, it comes down to people. And this quote really drives that point home. See, in many parts of the world, women farmers are at a higher risk from climate change, often because they have less access to money and resources. So for CSA to be truly smart, it can't ignore these social issues. It has to be designed to help everyone who's part of our food system. So this isn't just a few farmers here and there trying something new. Nope. We're talking about major international efforts to take these ideas and scale them up across the entire globe. And I mean, we are seeing this at the highest levels. You've got things like the European Green Deal pushing these practices. The Aim for Climate initiative is pulling together billions of dollars for new ideas. It's all pointing toward this incredibly ambitious goal, getting our global food systems to net zero emissions by 2050. But with big goals and a lot of money flying around, you have to ask, how do we know if any of this is actually working? Talk is cheap, right? So we need real accountability. Well, to handle that, organizations like the FAO have basically built a whole toolkit for monitoring this stuff. There are tools like Gleam that can model the environmental footprint of livestock, or another called Exact that helps figure out a project's carbon balance. These are the things that give us the hard data to make sure we're on the right track. Okay, so despite all this big-time support and all these fancy tools, there's a pretty big but we need to talk about. A lot of skepticism, actually. It's time for a little reality check. Here's the core concern people have. Is climate smart agriculture a real game changer, or has it just become a really convenient marketing buzzword that lets companies keep doing business as usual? And this quote gets right to the heart of the criticism. Basically, unlike a term like organic, which has strict rules, there's no single universal standard for what makes a farm climate smart. The term is flexible, maybe a little too flexible. And that vagueness, that ambiguity, well, that's what opens the door for greenwashing. The worry is that huge corporations can just slap the climate smart label on their products to look good without actually making any real, meaningful changes. It risks becoming a feel-good term with no teeth. So look, at the end of the day, climate smart agriculture has incredible promise. It gives us a blueprint for how we might be able to feed the world and heal our planet. But its success really boils down to integrity and accountability. The real question for all of us is whether it lives up to its name as a truly smart solution, or if it just ends up being a smart-sounding label.